Maureen laughed at her limp, unaware she got it saving. 400 SEALs behind enemy lines. Step aside, sweetheart. This briefing room's for Marines. Not whoever let you in dragging that leg. The words cut through the room like a blade scraping metal. Colonel Marcus Hale didn't lower his voice. He never did. 43 people stood in formation along the back wall. Officers, trainees, 2 maintenance crew who'd paused mid-task, and every one of them heard it. A few exchanged grins, the kind that spread. The room smelled of gun oil and recycled air. The ack above the eastern wall hummed one flat note. Outside, a diesel engine turned over in the motor pool. You could hear it through the walls. You couldn't hear much else after Hale spoke, because the room had decided to wait. The woman he'd addressed didn't look up. She was 31, maybe 32, with the kind of face that had been scrubbed clean of expression, the way field gear gets scrubbed of everything except what the material remembers. Plain Badoo jacket. No rank insignia on the collar. No unit patch on the shoulder. Regulation bun. Dark hair going almost black under the fluorescence. She had a limp, left leg, slight. The kind that didn't slow her but announced itself on every step. She was seated at the secondary briefing table, the one bolted to the left wall, and her hands were moving across the components of a disassembled M110 sniper rifle with mechanical precision that didn't come from a manual. She didn't flinch. Her hands continued moving. She reassembled the firing pin assembly in the time it took most people in the room to exhale. Hale was 6'2", broad-shouldered, with a chest ribbon configuration that said he'd served everywhere worth serving. 3 silver stars. 2 bronze with valor. 22 years of command worn like armor. He stood with his arms crossed, not loosely, but the way of a man who believes himself to own every room he walks into. He stepped closer. His shadow fell across her workspace, the components, the rifle. "I'm speaking to you," he said. "I heard you, sir." Her voice was quiet, not soft. "Calibrated. I'm finishing a function check." "You're done with your function check." She placed the final component. She looked up. "Yes, sir," she said. "I am now." The room waited. She met his eyes without expression, without deference, without the anxious blinking that usually followed someone meeting his eyes at this particular angle of authority. "Credentials," he said. She reached into her jacket and placed a laminated ID on the table without taking her eyes off him. He didn't reach for it immediately. He let it sit. "What's your rank?" "Higher than yours, sir," one beat. "You just don't know it yet." The room made a sound. Not quite a laugh, something smaller and sharper. Hale's jaw tightened. He picked up the ID. "Read it. Set it down without expression. We'll verify this," he said. "I'd expect nothing less," she said. He walked to the front. The briefing resumed. She returned to the M110. In the far corner, near the secondary entrance, a man who had not moved in several minutes finally moved. He uncapped his pen, looked at it as though he'd forgotten he was holding it. His name was Sergeant Major Gerald Voss, retired 6 months ago after 31 years of service, now a contracted training supervisor at Camp Calloway. 63 years old, and he had been watching this woman for 11 minutes before Hale ever opened his mouth. Not because of the limp, because of her hands. The angle of her wrists on the barrel components, the spacing of her fingers, the sequence, not the regulation sequence, not the quick, clean civilian version, but the specific one. The one he'd only ever seen at 2 schools, both of which had names most people in this building had never heard spoken aloud. He recapped his pen. His eyes stayed on her. Something about this woman. He couldn't place it. But it was there. The mockery spread before noon. Military gossip moved at the speed of group chats. By 11:30, the story had mutated twice. By the time it reached the eastern barracks, she'd challenged Hale to his face and gotten the rifle assembly wrong. By the motor pool, she had a forged ID and no authorization to be in the building at all. Neither version was accurate. Both agreed on the part that mattered. She didn't belong. Hale had said so. She ate her midday meal alone in the mess hall corner with the systematic efficiency of someone whose meals had been timed for years. Protein first, water at intervals. Tray cleared in 11 minutes. She wasn't eating, she was listening. Not to any one conversation, to the room. She mapped the patterns, who deferred to whom, which pairs of officers went quiet when a particular name was mentioned, where real authority ran beneath official rank. By the time she carried her tray to the window, she had a clearer picture of Camp Calloway's power structure than Hale's own staff had built in 6 months. Intelligence work. It looked exactly like eating alone. At 13:40 hours, she requested server access in the equipment staging area for routine diagnostics. The corporal managing the log looked at her badge and typed the access code with the deliberate slowness of someone following an instruction to cause friction. She waited. The monthly authentication prompt appeared. Rotating 12-digit alphanumeric. Classified timestamp encryption, changed every 30 days. Memorized, never stored. She entered it in 8 seconds. The corporal stared at the screen. Most operators needed 4 to 7 minutes. Some took longer. She had done it the way someone does something they've repeated 10,000 times, not thinking about the code at all, thinking only about what came after it. The corporal said nothing. She logged in and began her work. Voss passed the doorway on his afternoon rounds and slowed. He did not enter. He watched her navigate the server architecture, not through the standard menu tree, but through keyboard shortcuts that weren't in any user guide he'd been issued. His pen was in his hand. It wasn't moving. He added it to the picture he was building. At 16:15, Colonel Hale formally initiated a credentials investigation. He cited Security Protocol 7.4, unauthorized presence in classified environments, unverified clearance, anomalous behavior consistent with intelligence gathering. He said it in front of witnesses, with the theatrical deliberateness of a man who wants his competence observed. She cooperated. Her answers were exactly as long as the questions required. When did you arrive at Camp Calloway? Tuesday 0430. Who authorized your access? My orders did. Where did those orders originate? Above my clearance to discuss in this setting. Hale's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? My orders originated above the clearance level appropriate to this facility. She looked at him without apology. You'll need to go up the chain to verify them, sir, not down. He held the moment for 4 full seconds. Hold her badge. She controls her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. 2 security personnel escorted her badge away. She watched them go. She checked her watch once, a standard field watch, thick-strapped, scratched face, the kind that didn't come from a surplus store. She noted the time, returned to waiting. Voss observed through the corridor window. Her posture didn't change, not approximately. Exactly, he'd seen that particular stillness in 4 people across 31 years, and none of them had been where you'd expect to find them either. He needed one more piece before he made the call. By 1900, the annex mess hall was closing. She was in the secondary equipment room alone, running what appeared to be a maintenance check on communications hardware. Her left sleeve had ridden up during the work. Voss entered without announcing himself. He looked at what the sleeve had exposed. A tattoo. Not large. Not decorative. A simple rectangle of classified insignia in deep blue black on the inner left forearm, a designation number, and beneath it a call sign in block text. Argent. Voss went rigid. His hand drifted, involuntarily, the way hands sometimes do when the body recognizes something before the mind catches up, toward his left breast pocket where, 6 months ago, he'd carried his own credentials. He stopped the movement. He breathed once. He looked at the tattoo for 2 full seconds. She looked up. She met his eyes. He said nothing. For a long moment. "I'd like to know," he said, carefully, "how you got that designation." She read him the way you read terrain before deciding if it's safe to move. "I earned it," she said. He exhaled. He looked at her face. He looked at the limp and thought about the kind of injury that produces a limp like that. Not surgical, not training. The kind that means being in a specific location when something happened that shouldn't have happened. He thought about 7 years ago. A valley. A country whose name still didn't appear in public records. He thought about 400 seals. "I need to make a phone call," he said quietly. This time he made it. At 21:03 hours, they formally detained her. The room was 8 feet by 10. Concrete walls, gray over gray over gray, old paint showing through in layers. A metal bench. One window near the ceiling showing only black sky. The smell of disinfectant failing to cover something older and more mineral. The smell of a room that had held frightened people before. They had taken her badge. They had not taken her watch. Nobody ever thought to take the watch. That was how she'd planned this. 11 weeks ago. Before she ever arrived at Camp Calloway. She looked at the face. Military time, 21:07. In 19 minutes, she would miss her scheduled check-in. When it went missed, a protocol activated, automatically, designed to function even if she couldn't trigger it herself. One specific, secure line. One duty officer with instructions for exactly this contingency. In 64 minutes, a secondary protocol she'd set in motion 3 months ago would reach 7 people simultaneously. Each would make exactly 1 call. Each call would be answered before the first ring finished. In approximately 2 hours, Colonel Marcus Hale was going to learn the difference between a rank printed on a file and the kind of authority that exists in rooms he's never been cleared to enter. This is the near-fail moment. The point where anyone watching from the outside would think she's finished. Caught. Game over. Except games have rules. And she was about to show them they'd been playing the wrong game entirely. She sat with her hands folded, her back straight, and she waited the way she had learned to wait, not passively, but with the specific stillness of someone who has waited in far smaller rooms under far more dangerous circumstances. She breathed. 4 in. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. Her left leg ached when she'd been still too long. It always did. She ignored it the way she'd been ignoring it for 7 years, not suppressing it, not fighting it, just letting it exist alongside everything else. Outside the door, she could hear the facility settling into its evening rhythms. Shift change at 2200. Skeleton crew after that. Boots on concrete. A radio crackling somewhere down the hall. Then, distantly, a door opening and closing with the particular authority of someone who'd been told this was urgent. She looked at the ceiling. The sky in the window rectangle had gone the absolute black of a base at night. No ambient light, just stars if you had the angle to see them, which she didn't. She waited. The first crack came at 22:18. Voss, retired, contracted, technically without any standing to do what he was about to do, stopped Colonel Hale in the corridor outside the detention room and said quietly, "Sir." I'd be very careful about this one. Hale looked at him. You have no standing in a security investigation. Boss, no, sir. His face was controlled. 31 years of saying difficult things to difficult people in difficult rooms. But I've been in this long enough to know when a chain of custody runs higher than anyone in this building. He paused. Higher than you, sir, with respect. Hale held his gaze for 5 seconds, dismissed Voss with a gesture, walked away without looking back. Voss watched him go. He uncapped his pen. He didn't write anything. He capped it again and stood in the corridor and waited, the way you wait when you know what's coming, and you need to be standing in the right place when it arrives. At 22:41, the sound changed. Not loud. The opposite. A compression of sound. The way a facility goes momentarily quieter when something entering it carries weight. Voss heard it. The desk corporal at the main entrance heard it. Hale, in the operations room reviewing his investigation file, did not hear it because he wasn't listening for it. 3 black SUVs, government plates, parked with precision on the motor pool gravel. Not standard transport. Command birds. The men who got out move the way men move when they've been doing serious things for serious organizations long enough that even crossing gravel carries a particular economy. 6 of them total. 2 in federal plainclothes. 4 in service dress senior enough that the uniform itself did work before anyone opened their mouth. 4 generals. They walked into Camp Calloway's annex at 22:42 and asked, without preamble, for the duty officer. The duty officer appeared in 30 seconds. The senior general, 3 stars, Joint Chief's insignia, the kind of bearing that turned rooms toward him without asking, said, "Where is she?" Not a question. The front desk corporal went the specific color of someone who has understood, too late, that they've made an error in a chain of events they didn't know was a chain. He said, "I'll need to contact Colonel Hale. You'll take us to her," the general said. They took him to her. In the operations room, something was happening to Hale's screen. He noticed it at 22:44, a notification flag he'd never seen before. A clearance indicator that shouldn't have existed on any file he could access, opening a subfolder that wasn't in the directory he'd been working from. He clicked it. The file had a classification header above every field. He read the name. He read the designation. He read the mission record field. 3 lines, redacted to 3 letters and 2 numbers, and even those 3 letters meant something to people who knew what they were looking for. He read the call sign. Argent. He went rigid. His blood ran cold. He stood from the desk. The chair scraped concrete. He walked fast toward the detention corridor. Voss was already at the bend where the main corridor met the secondary hallway. He watched the 4 generals pass. He stepped back against the wall. The door opened. She was seated with her hands folded, her back straight, watching the wall opposite with the steady attention of someone who has nothing to fear from silence. The senior general stepped through. The other 3 filed in behind him. Federal agents held the corridor. She looked at the general. She stood. She didn't salute. She didn't need to. He looked at her left forearm. The sleeve had ridden up during the long sit. The tattoo was visible in the corridor light, the designation number, the block text call sign, the specific insignia that appeared on one classification of document and one only. He went absolutely still. The room detonated. One general saw the tattoo first. Another saw his face change, and that was enough. Actual audible sounds from multiple people. Someone in the corridor dropped a tablet. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. The ack hum became suddenly deafening, the only sound left in a space where several highly trained adults had momentarily lost access to language. Not theatrical silence. The other kind. Weight, pressure, a boot scuffed tile. A badge clinked the doorframe. Small sounds. Enormous. The senior general's hand moved, slowly, with the deliberateness of a man choosing the action, not performing it, meaning every degree of the angle. Hand to brow. Crisp, exact. The formal salute of someone who has never given it to anyone who didn't outrank him, now giving it to one who did. The general to his left raised his hand. The one behind raised his hand. The fourth raised his hand. 4 generals in a detention room at Camp Calloway's annex, saluting a woman in unmarked BDUs with a limp and no rank insignia, who had been formally detained 3 hours earlier by a colonel who'd laughed at her credentials. She returned the salute. Precise, not approximately. Exactly. The form. The angle. The duration, muscle memory from 1,000 formal occasions in places whose names still didn't appear in public records. The senior general lowered his hand. He looked at her for a moment, not assessing, not verifying. Something closer to recognition. He said, for the record, in the silence of that room, loud enough for the corridor, Commander Alina Voss Ramirez. Call Sign Argent, SEAL Team 6. Classified Covert Operations. Commanding, 7 years operational. Classified Kill Record. Current active mission status. A pause. Every person in this facility, including myself, answers to her authority. The corridor held its breath for 3 seconds. Then, Voss, 63 years old, 31 years of service, standing at the bend with his pen uncapped in his hand, raised his hand slowly to his brow. He held it there. Not because the generals had, not because protocol required it. Because Gerald Voss had served 3 decades, and he knew what he was looking at. And he chose this. He chose it from everything in his body. From the memory of what those 7 years had cost, and who had paid, and where the bodies had been recovered, and where they hadn't. 4 seconds. Then he lowered his hand and looked at the floor. Hale arrived at the corridor entrance at 22:49. He saw the generals. He saw the agents. He saw Voss. He looked through the open door and saw her, upright, unhurried, watching him arrive with no expression, no anger, nothing theatrical. His face did something involuntary. It started near his eyes and moved downward, cycling through surprise, denial, and finally something that resembled genuine fear. The real kind, not embarrassment. He went quiet. Not theatrical quiet, the silence of a man who has understood, too late, that the rules of the room have always been different from what he believed. He could not speak. Colonel Hale. The senior general said, level, procedural. You are relieved of your current post pending formal review of your conduct today, and a separate investigation into the classified security breach Commander Ramirez's operation has documented over the past 11 weeks. He paused. Your credentials will be held pending that review. He said the last sentence exactly the way Hale had said it to her, not for cruelty, for the record. 2 federal agents stepped forward. Hale did not resist. He looked once more at the woman in the room, at the tattoo on her forearm, at the watch on her wrist that nobody had thought to take, at the calm that had not moved or shifted across every hour he'd spent testing it. She was already looking past him, already thinking about Phase 2. The arrests happened quietly. That was the most notable thing, the absence of drama, the institutional efficiency of justice when it finally moves. No speeches. No confrontations, just the flat procedural work of authorized people. Acting by 0200, 3 individuals were in federal custody. 2 more were being located. The investigation Hale had triggered trying to discredit her. The credential verification, the security inquiry, the chain of formal documentation he'd assembled became the primary mechanism of his own undoing. He had documented himself, his contacts, the facility's gaps. He had built, with his own hands, exactly the case file the people now using it needed. He had destroyed himself. She didn't watch the arrests. By 0130, she was at a window in the western corridor, chest height, half obscured by a ventilation unit, showing a narrow band of sky where the base lights gave out. Deep blue-black, no cloud cover, stars where the light permitted. She stood there for a while. The leg ached the way it always did when she'd been still too long. She let it ache. 7 years ago, she had been the last one out of a valley in a country whose name still didn't appear in public records. Carrying 2 men who couldn't carry themselves, moving through terrain that was trying to kill her, with a left leg that had been introduced, violently and without ceremony, to 4 centimeters of shrapnel. 411 Navy SEALs had gone into that operation. 411 had come back out. 410 because of the mission parameters. 411 because of her. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. They mocked her limp. They forgot where she got it. That was the fundamental error, not the arrogance or the contempt or the diminutives delivered in front of witnesses. The error was simpler than all of that. The assumption that what appeared smaller was smaller, that what carried no insignia carried no rank, that a woman who didn't explain herself had nothing to explain. Justice isn't loud, it's patient. She checked her watch. 0147, at 0200 she would make 1 call on the secure line they'd restored to her. Brief, A duty officer. Mission Phase 1 complete. Authorization requested for Phase 2. Phase 2 had been in motion for 3 weeks. 11 names on the list. Tonight, 6 moved from active to detained. 4 still active. 1 still unknown, the one that mattered most. 11 weeks ago, she had pulled a surveillance image from an encrypted drive. Rooftop, urban setting, Middle Eastern architecture. Timestamp 3 years old. A figure, male she believed, coat she'd seen before, watching a specific street on a specific day, the day everything that shouldn't have happened had happened. Someone had been there. Someone had known. Someone who had never been identified in any inquiry. Someone who was still out there. She closed her eyes for 1 moment. Opened them. Tomorrow brings new ghosts to hunt. She looked at the narrow strip of sky above the ventilation unit, at the stars in it, at the specific weight of a clear night that reminds you the sky is enormous, and the earth is small, and the work is never finished. Only paused. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.